Karen broke into my car, claimed it was hers. Part 1. I never thought a Saturday morning could ruin my life or fix it in ways I didn't see coming. I'm Marcus Walker, 32 years old, a former Marine turned paramedic. I live in a modest neighborhood just outside of Atlanta, the kind where folks wave at you when you drive by and the gas station clerks know your name. My car, a dark blue 2020 Dodge Charger, wasn't just a vehicle. It was my pride and joy. Bought it after my second deployment, paid for with blood, sweat, and every penny I'd ever saved. That morning, I had just finished a grueling night shift. Double overtime. 12 calls back to back. My muscles ached, my head throbbed, and all I wanted was to grab a black coffee from the diner 2 blocks away before collapsing into bed for 18 hours. When I parked my Charger in front of the diner, the street was quiet except for a couple of joggers and an old man walking a golden retriever. I locked my car, pocketed the keys, and stumbled toward Caffeine Salvation. I wasn't in the diner for more than 10 minutes. When I stepped out, I saw her, a woman with a platinum blonde bob haircut, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, and a posture that screamed entitlement, standing beside my car. My car with her hands on her hips. At first I thought maybe she was just admiring it, but then I saw it. She was inside my car. The driver's side door was wide open. She was rummaging through my glove compartment, tossing papers and emergency supplies onto the sidewalk, like they were trash. My blood ran cold. "Hey!" I shouted, breaking into a run. She didn't even flinch. When I got closer, she turned around and looked at me like I was the intruder. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked, heart pounding. She pulled herself up to her full height like she was about to scold a misbehaving child. "This is my car," she said with a voice dripping with fake patience, like I was slow or dangerous. I stared at her stunned. "Lady, this is my car. I have the keys right here." I dangled them in front of her face. She barely glanced at them. "Sure you do. You people always find a way." You people. 2 words sharp as knives, sharper than any insult. Something deep inside me snapped. "Step away from the car," I said, low and dangerous. Instead, she lunged forward and slammed the car door shut on my hand. Pain exploded through my fingers. I stumbled back, cursing. Before I could react, she was dialing 911 on her phone, with manic energy shrieking into the speaker. "Yes, I'm at the Willow Creek Diner. A man, he's black. He's trying to steal my car. He attacked me. He has a weapon." The lies rolled off her tongue like she had rehearsed them. People were starting to gather. Phones came out. Cameras started rolling. I could feel the weight of judgment, suspicion, fear. I backed up, hands raised, heart hammering, so loud I thought I would pass out. "I'm the one who called," she shrieked when the first police cruiser pulled up. She ran toward the officers, playing the role of the frightened victim so well it would have earned her an Oscar. The officers were tense. One put his hand on his holster. I froze. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice. But I remembered my training. I remembered survival. "Officer," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "this is my car. My name is Marcus Walker. I have my registration in my wallet, keys in my pocket. Please, please just check." The officers hesitated. The blonde woman, Karen, was still yelling, still pointing, still sobbing about how dangerous I was. One of the officers, younger than me and clearly uncomfortable, asked for my ID. I handed it over, praying it would be enough. And then a second cruiser arrived. Out stepped an officer I recognized, Sergeant Alicia Ramirez. She lived 3 streets over from me. We'd worked together before on community health outreach programs. She caught my eye and her whole body stiffened when she saw Karen. "What's going on here?" Ramirez asked. Karen launched into her performance again, weaving lies so seamlessly it was terrifying. Ramirez didn't say anything at first. She just walked over to my car, examined the door lock, picked up the key fob from my hand and pressed it. Beep, beep. The Charger's lights flashed. The locks clicked. Ramirez turned to Karen, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Ma'am," she said coldly, "you're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted theft, filing a false police report, and assault." The world froze. Karen's mouth dropped open. Me, I'm the victim here." "You are not the victim," Ramirez snapped. "You broke into this man's car. You assaulted him. You lied to the police." Karen started sobbing, real tears now. She collapsed onto the sidewalk, clutching her designer purse like it could shield her from reality. The crowd, once tense and uncertain, erupted into applause. Phones recorded everything. It was live streamed. Within hours, the video hit millions of views. Entitled woman tries to steal black man's car and gets instant karma. The headlines screamed. The public outrage was volcanic. News vans camped outside Karen's suburban McMansion. Her face was plastered across every screen, every app, every platform. She lost her job. Her husband filed for divorce. Her so-called friends disappeared faster than morning mist. But somehow that wasn't the end. For a while, I tried to pretend it didn't bother me, tried to go back to work, tried to shake off the image of her face twisted in rage, in entitlement, in fear. But the truth was, it gnawed at me. Not because I wanted revenge, although part of me did. Not because of the bruised fingers or the sleepless nights replaying the moment she slammed the door on me. It gnawed at me because it wasn't just her. It was the looks I got every time I parked my Charger now. The whispers at the gas station, the people crossing the street when they saw me coming. Karen had cracked open something ugly, something that had been festering under the surface all along. The hate mail started arriving 2 days after the video went viral. Stay out of our neighborhood. Go back where you came from. Thieves like you don't belong here. I burned every letter. I deleted every email, but they left scars no one could see. Meanwhile, Karen went silent. Her lawyer released a statement blaming mental health struggles and misunderstood intentions. The media lapped it up at first until the diner released their security footage. There she was, clear as day, breaking into my car, lying to the police, assaulting me. No mental health excuse could cover that up. The backlash doubled overnight. Petitions circulated demanding criminal charges. Activists held small rallies outside the courthouse, chanting my name alongside demands for justice. Neighbors who once pretended not to know me now brought casseroles, awkward apologies, and offers to testify if needed. It was overwhelming. It was humbling. It was exhausting. I spent hours sitting alone on my porch, staring at the Charger, wondering if it would ever feel like mine again. One evening, about 2 weeks after the incident, a knock came at my door. It was Sergeant Ramirez. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, holding up a six-pack of beer. I nodded, stepping aside. We sat in silence for a long time, the crickets chirping, the warm Georgia air wrapping around us. Finally, she spoke. "You know she reached out." I stiffened. Karen, Ramirez nodded grimly. "Through her lawyer, wants to meet, apologize." I laughed, a hollow sound. "Yeah, because that'll fix everything." "Maybe not," Ramirez said, voice low. "But sometimes facing the people you hurt changes you. Sometimes." I didn't answer. I didn't want to see her face ever again. I didn't want her apology. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "Maybe it's not just about you. Maybe it was about making her see what she almost destroyed. Maybe it was about reclaiming my own dignity face to face. Maybe it was about closure." The meeting was set for a Tuesday afternoon at the community center, neutral ground. I wore my uniform navy blue EMT polo dark pants because it reminded me who I was. Not a victim, not a stereotype, a rescuer, a fighter. Karen arrived 15 minutes late. Gone was the haughty posture, the air of superiority. She looked small, defeated. Her blonde hair was a mess. Her expensive clothes hung on her frame like they didn't belong to her anymore. She sat across from me at the cheap plastic table, wringing her hands until her knuckles turned white. The mediator, a soft-spoken older woman named Ms. Holcomb, opened the session. "Karen," she said gently, "this is your opportunity." Karen swallowed hard, looking everywhere but at me. I was wrong," she said finally. Her voice cracked. "I judged you. I assumed the worst, and I hurt you. I could have ruined your life." Her hands trembled. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. I want you to know I'm sorry, truly sorry." For a long moment, I said nothing. I stared at her, at the broken woman who had once tried to paint me as a criminal to save her own skin. I thought about all the nights I'd sat awake wondering if one wrong move that day would have gotten me killed. I thought about the letters, the looks, the weight I still carried. And then I thought about the little boy I'd once been sitting on the porch steps of my grandmother's house in Macon, Listening to her say, "We don't carry hate in these hands, Marcus. We build with them." Slowly, I leaned forward. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. "Not yet, maybe not ever." Karen flinched. "But I hope you learn," I continued. "I hope you carry the weight of what you did not as punishment, but as a reminder. Every day to do better." Tears slipped down her face. "I will," she whispered. We stood up. There was no handshake, no hug, just two broken people facing the wreckage and choosing to walk away from it. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. Karen disappeared from the spotlight. Sure, but not into hiding. She sold her massive house, moved into a modest apartment across town. She started volunteering at the same community center where we met, working with at-risk youth. She showed up at town halls quietly pushing for police reform and better racial bias training. It didn't erase what she did. It didn't make her a hero, but it made her human again. And for me, it didn't wipe away the scars either. But it gave me something stronger than anger. It gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, change was possible. One brutal, messy, painful conversation at a time. And on the days when the nightmares still woke me up, or when the stares still burned holes in my back, I reminded myself I survived. I stood my ground. I kept my dignity. No one could ever take that away from me again. Part 2. Life didn't magically get better after that meeting. If anything, it got messier. Sure, the viral video faded, the hashtag stopped trending, the reporter stopped calling. But the world had already seen me one way, and not everyone was willing to unsee it. A few weeks after the mediation, I was grocery shopping at Miller's Market, the local place where I used to know every cashier by name. I was halfway through the cereal aisle when I heard the whisper, "That's him, that's the car thief." It hit like a slap. I turned around and locked eyes with a woman clutching her kid to her chest like I was about to snatch him. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to drop my basket and run, but mostly I just felt tired. Bone deep tired, I straightened my shoulders and kept walking, one foot in front of the other, like I couldn't hear them, like it didn't matter. Later, sitting in my car, I realized it wasn't the fear that stung the most. It was the disappointment, the realization that no matter how clearly the truth had been laid out, some people would cling to their hate like a life raft. That night, I got a call from Mrs. Holcomb, the mediator. "You doing okay, Marcus?" she asked, her voice soft. "Define okay," I said dryly. She chuckled, but there was sadness in it. "Listen," she said, "there's a community event coming up. Unity in the park, food trucks, music workshops on bias training, community rebuilding, that sort of thing. We could really use someone like you." I almost laughed. Me. The guy people cross the street to avoid. "Think about it," she said before hanging up. "Sometimes the best way to fight hate is to drown it in something bigger." I stared at my phone for a long time after that. Bigger than the fear, bigger than the anger, bigger than the ugly little voice in my head that said, "They'll never change." Maybe she was right. Maybe fighting back didn't always mean fists and fire. Maybe it meant showing up, even when it hurt. Unity in the park was held on the first Saturday in May. I showed up early, volunteering to help set up folding chairs and banners under the blistering sun. It was awkward at first. Some people stared, some muttered, but some smiled. Kids ran past me with sticky popsicles and balloon swords. An elderly black woman in a wheelchair rolled by and gave me a nod so full of quiet strength it almost brought tears to my eyes. By noon, the park was full. Food trucks lined the curb, tacos, barbecue, soul food, vegan wraps. Local bands played everything from blues to rock to gospel. I was handing out water bottles when I saw her, Karen, standing by the bounce house wearing jeans and a t-shirt with the words "Listen, Learn, Love" printed across the front. She looked awkward, out of place, but she was there, helping kids climb into the bounce house, picking up trash, smiling when no one smiled back. At one point, a little black girl, maybe 6 years old, tugged on Karen's sleeve. "Can you help me tie my shoe?" Karen knelt down without hesitation. No cameras, no audience, just two human beings. One small act of kindness. It didn't erase what she did, but it was something. Later, when the sun dipped low and the crowd started thinning, Miss Holcomb called me up to the makeshift stage. Marcus, she said into the mic, is one of the reasons we're here today. His courage, his dignity in the face of injustice reminds us all what real strength looks like. I swallowed hard, stepping up beside her. The crowd applauded, some cheered. A few people stayed silent. I took the mic, hands trembling slightly. I didn't come here today because I'm brave. I said, my voice carried over the warm evening air. I came because I'm tired of being afraid, tired of being angry, tired of carrying hate that doesn't belong to me. A hush fell over the crowd. I'm not perfect, none of us are. But maybe if we show up for each other, even when it's uncomfortable, that's how we start healing. There was silence for a heartbeat, then applause. Louder this time. Real, some people stood, some wiped away tears, and for the first time in a long time, the tight knot in my chest loosened just a little after the event. As I was loading chairs into the back of a pickup truck, Karen approached. She stopped a few feet away, hands stuffed into her pockets, looking like she was fighting a war inside her head. She started, then stopped. I waited. I just wanted to say thank you, she said finally, for giving me the chance to be better. I studied her for a long moment. You gave yourself that chance, I said quietly. She nodded, blinking fast. And then to my utter shock, she reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a check, made out to the community center for $10,000. I figured it's the least I could do. She said, real change needs resources. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Not a forced, polite smile. A real one. Maybe this was what Ms. Holcomb meant when she said drown the hate in something bigger. Maybe this was what survival looked like, not just breathing, but building something better. Together. Part 3. Life had a funny way of reminding me that healing wasn't linear. For every moment of progress, there were setbacks waiting just around the corner. About 2 weeks after the Unity event, I was called to respond to a 3-car collision on Highway 87. It was messy, screaming kids, leaking fuel, broken glass glittering in the sunlight like spilled diamonds. I was triaging the wounded when I heard someone mutter under their breath, "Figures the thief would show up." I didn't even look up. I couldn't afford to. But it burned just the same. Later, back at the station, I sat alone in the break room, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, wondering if it would ever stop, wondering if I would ever be allowed to just be again. That's when Captain Dunham walked in. He was a gruff man in his late 50s, with the kind of voice that sounded like it had been sandpapered by decades of shouting over sirens. "You got a minute, Walker?" he asked. I nodded wearily. He sat across from me, folding his big hands on the table. "Listen," he said, voice low. "I can't undo what's out there. Can't change people's minds overnight." I waited. "But I can tell you this," he said, fixing me with a steady look. "You've got a reputation in this department, and it ain't because of some viral video. It's because when shot hits the fan, you're the guy people want at their side." My throat tightened. "Don't let a bunch of bigots and cowards make you forget who the hell you are," he growled. "Understood." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Good," Dunham said, standing up. "Now get your ass back to work. It wasn't a grand speech, it wasn't a cure-all, but it helped God it helped." Later that week, Ms. Holcomb called again. "Marcus," she said, "there's an opportunity, might be crazy, but hear me out." I chuckled. "That's how all bad ideas start." She laughed. "Maybe, but this one might just be the start of something good." There was going to be a town hall. Not the kind with politicians and endless speeches, but a real one where people could come, speak, ask questions, confront their biases out loud. They needed someone to sit on the panel, someone real, someone people had already judged, already misunderstood. They needed me. The night of the town hall, I almost didn't show up. I paced my living room for an hour, staring at the uniform hanging by the door at the Charger, parked in the driveway. Memories flooded back, Karen's screaming police hands hovering over guns, the way people still looked at me. But then I remembered something Captain Dunham said. "Don't let them define you." So I put on my uniform, I got in my car, and I drove to the town hall. The place was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls fanning themselves with folded flyers. When they introduced me, there was a ripple through the crowd, some curious, some skeptical, some downright hostile. I sat between Ms. Holcomb and Sergeant Ramirez, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The first questions were easy: logistics, parking complaints, noise ordinances. Then came the hard ones. A man stood up near the back, middle-aged, red ball cap, arms crossed. "Why should we trust you?" he barked. "You expect us to believe you're some kind of saint just because the media says so." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood gripping the sides of the podium. "I'm not asking you to see me as a saint," I said, voice steady. "I'm asking you to see me as a man." I paused, letting that hang in the air. A man who's been judged before anyone asked a question. A man who's been lied about, threatened, humiliated, all because of the way I look. The man scoffed, but others leaned in. "And yeah," I said, "there are good people. People who stepped up. People who said, this isn't right. Inamai. But there's still too many who would rather believe a lie than face an uncomfortable truth." I glanced around the room. I'm standing here because change doesn't happen in safe spaces. It happens when we stay, when we listen, when we refuse to let fear win. Silence heavy charged and then applause. Not everyone, not even most, but enough to make my chest ache in the best way. After the town hall, people approached, some to argue, some to apologize, some just to shake my hand. One woman, elderly with weathered skin and trembling fingers, pressed a note into my hand before disappearing into the crowd. Later, unfolding it under the streetlights, I read, "Thank you, my grandson needed to hear you tonight." I leaned against my charger and cried for the first time in months, big, messy, heaving sobs that tore something loose inside me. It wasn't over. It would never be over. But maybe, just maybe, it was getting better. One story at a time. One conversation at a time. One stubborn, exhausted, still standing heart at a time. Part 4, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the town hall, an article hit the local paper. A hit piece, paramedics passed. Questioned after viral incident. Criminal record discovered, complete garbage. The criminal record, they referenced a parking ticket from college I forgot to pay, a noise complaint from a barbecue I hosted after returning from Afghanistan. But facts didn't matter. The headlines spread like wildfire. Local news stations ran segments with my face blurred behind ominous music. Online forums buzzed, old women at the grocery store clutched their purses tighter again. The weight I thought I had shed came crashing back twice as heavy. It felt personal. It was personal. Karen, someone leaked my name, my address. I had no proof, but deep down I knew. Someone wanted to remind me that no matter how much progress I thought I made, I was always one bad headline away from losing everything. The next Saturday night, just past midnight, I heard a crash outside. I bolted upright, heart pounding. Another crash, then shouting. I grabbed my phone and ran to the window, and there under the harsh glare of the street lamp was my Charger, spray-painted smashed windshield, tires slashed across the side in jagged red letters. Thief. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I called the police, filed a report I knew wouldn't go anywhere. Then I sat on the curb, head in my hands, as neighbors peeked from their windows, but didn't come out. When the tow truck pulled away with my battered car, it felt like watching a part of myself vanish. I wasn't safe. I wasn't wanted, not really. Maybe I never would be. 3 days later, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, Karen stood there. No cameras, no lawyer. Just Karen holding a set of car keys. "I heard what happened," she said. Her voice was raw, shaky. I'm so sorry." I stared at her, too stunned to speak. She lifted the keys. "I bought you a car." I blinked. "What?" "I know it doesn't fix anything." She rushed out. "It's not forgiveness. It's not enough. But you deserve better than what they did to you. And if I can make even a tiny dent in what I broke, then I have to try." I stared at the shiny black SUV parked at the curb. Not a Charger, not flashy, but reliable, sturdy. I could feel the sincerity radiating off her in waves. No press, no stunt, just a broken woman trying to stitch back a world she helped tear apart. Slowly, I took the keys. "Thank you," I said, voice rough. Not for the car, for finally seeing me. really seeing me. Word spread fast. At first, people whispered, then they gossiped, then surprisingly, they rallied. A local mechanic offered to rebuild my charger for free. Neighborhood kids painted cards that said, "We're glad you're here," and taped them to my door. The tide was turning again, this time in a way that felt real earned. Not everyone came around, some never would. But enough did enough that I could breathe again without flinching. Enough that I could walk into Miller's Market without hearing slurs whispered under breath. Enough that for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. 6 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps. Not in handcuffs, not in shame. In a suit and tie, standing tall as the mayor, handed me the city's Community Hero Award for bravery, perseverance, and for reminding us all what dignity truly looks like. She said into the microphone. I accepted the plaque, blinking against the sun and the sting in my eyes. Among the crowd, I saw Karen clapping, tears streaking her cheeks. Not seeking forgiveness, not asking for anything, just there, bearing witness. And somehow that meant more than anything. Later, she found me by the fountain. "You deserved better from the start," she said softly. I looked at her for a long time. I deserved to be treated like a human being. I said, "We all do." She nodded. "I'm trying." "I know." I said. We stood there for a moment, two people forever linked by a terrible day, but also by something harder to explain. Change, painful, messy, stubborn change. The kind that doesn't happen in grand gestures or viral videos. The kind that happens in conversations and second chances. In choosing to show up even when it's easier to hide. I turned toward the fountain, the late afternoon light shimmering across the water, and I allowed myself finally to believe. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about carrying it forward, heavy and honest, and building something better anyway. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one heart at a time. Part 5. After the awards ceremony, life didn't return to normal, it evolved. I became something of a reluctant local figure. The man who didn't just survive injustice, he turned it into a bridge. The man who didn't let bitterness win. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had now. I was invited to speak at high schools, to lead workshops on racial bias and reconciliation, to sit on community boards shaping policy. Each time I stepped onto a stage, I thought about that Saturday morning, the way Karen's voice had cut across the parking lot, the way she had tried to tear down everything I was with one phone call. Each time I spoke, I pushed back against that narrative, not with anger, but with truth. One chilly morning in November, about a year after it all started, I got another unexpected visitor, Karen. She stood on my porch, hands stuffed in the pockets of a simple wool coat. No makeup, no designer bags, just Karen. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, not because I was afraid, but because trust was no longer something I handed out easily. Still, I nodded and stepped aside. We sat in my living room, the silence thick between us. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said. "About what I did, about what it means to really change." I said nothing, letting her find her words. "I hurt you," she said, voice breaking. "And I hurt everyone who ever trusted someone like me to be better." Tears filled her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. "I can't undo that," she said, "but I can spend the rest of my life trying to make sure I never hurt anyone like that again." I studied her. Gone was the woman who thought the world owed her something. Gone was the woman who thought appearances were everything. In her place was someone raw, someone real. "I believe you," I said finally. She let out a shuddering breath like she'd been holding it in for a year. "And I wanted you to be the first to know," she said, reaching into her coat pocket. "I'm starting a nonprofit." She handed me a brochure. The Bridge Project, building understanding across divides programs for racial bias education, youth mentorships, community rebuilding initiatives, all funded by the sale of my old house, she said with a shaky smile. Figured it was time to do something real with my privilege. I turned the brochure over in my hands, heart full. "You're serious about this?" I said. She nodded. "Good," I said, "because the world doesn't need more apologies. It needs action." Her smile widened, trembling at the edges. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here. Not to be praised, not to be absolved, but to work. The launch of the bridge project was nothing like the flashy galas Karen once would have thrown. It was held in the community center, gymnasium, plastic folding chairs, homemade banners, homemade food. But the place was packed. Black, white, Latino, Asian, young, old, cynical, hopeful. All there because somewhere deep down they wanted to believe change was possible. Karen stood at the podium, hands shaking slightly, and told the truth about what she had done, about who she had been, about who she wanted to be. The crowd listened, some skeptical, some angry, but they listened. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, and then one clap, then another and another, until the room filled with cautious, fragile, determined applause. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something harder, something better. Accountability after the event. As the crowd trickled out into the cold night air, Karen found me by the door. "You think it'll work?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I thought about it, about how easy it would be to say no, to stay angry, to guard my heart forever. But then I remembered the little boy who needed someone to believe in second chances, the soldier who needed to believe sacrifice wasn't for nothing, the man who needed to believe that people could sometimes choose better. I think, I said slowly, that real change isn't measured by one speech or one program, or even one lifetime. I looked her straight in the eye. It's measured by whether you keep showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Karen blinked fast, nodding. "I will," she said. "For them." I added, nodding toward the kids helping fold up chairs. "And for me," she said quietly. "And for me," we shook hands, not as enemies, not even fully as friends, but as two human beings choosing stubbornly, painfully to believe that the world could be better than it had been, and somehow that was enough. For now, months later, sitting alone in my rebuilt Charger, I thought back to everything that had happened. The lies, the fear, the rage, and then the conversations, the apologies, the rebuilding. It hadn't been clean. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been fair. But it had been real. And as I drove past the community center, where a dozen kids now played basketball under a banner that read, "Everyone belongs," I smiled because this messy, imperfect, hard-fought hope was what survival looked like. Not just for me, for all of us. One choice at a time. One breath at a time. One stubborn, relentless, unapologetic act of believing in something bigger. And in that moment, I knew they could take my car. They could take my reputation. They could try to take my peace, but they could never take my dignity. Never again. Part 6. Time moved on. Seasons changed, kids grew taller. Old wounds became scars, faded but never forgotten. The bridge project thrived beyond anyone's expectations. Karen worked tirelessly, quietly, humbly. No interviews, no spotlights. She became the kind of person she probably should have been all along. A listener, a builder, a hand reaching across divides. As for me, I kept working as a paramedic, kept showing up, kept living. But some nights when the city quieted and the stars blinked awake, I found myself thinking back to that morning outside the diner, to how easily it could have ended differently. One wrong move, one twitch of a trigger finger, one more person willing to believe the worst about me. It was a sobering thought. It was also a reminder. Every day I woke up breathing, standing, moving forward. It was a choice. It was a victory, not just for me, but for everyone who never got the chance. One rainy afternoon, almost 2 years to the day after the incident, I got a call. It was Miss Holcomb. "Marcus," she said, excitement crackling through the line. "We're holding a reunion for everyone who's been part of the bridge project, past and present." I smiled. "Sounds good." And she added, "We're unveiling something special." "Like what?" "You'll see," she said, laughter in her voice. The day of the reunion, the community center buzzed with energy. Banners hung from the rafters. Tables overflowed with food crafts and photos from past events. Old faces, new faces, smiles, hugs, laughter. For the first time in a long time, the crowd didn't feel heavy with tension. It felt alive. Hopeful, at one point, Karen took the stage. She looked different now. Older, sure, but stronger too. In the way people look when they've faced the worst parts of themselves and chosen to be better. She cleared her throat, clutching a small box in her hands. Before we wrap up, she said, there's someone we need to honor. Someone who didn't just survive injustice, but turned it into something bigger, something stronger. My heart hammered. She smiled directly at me. Marcus Walker. She said, would you please come up here? The room erupted into applause. I stood slowly, heart pounding against my ribs, and made my way to the stage. Karen opened the box and pulled out a medal. Not a cheap trinket, a real heavy engraved medal. For courage, for dignity, for building bridges where others burned them. I swallowed hard as she placed it around my neck. The weight of it was nothing compared to the weight of what it meant. I stepped up to the mic, blinking fast. I'm not special, I said hoarsely. I'm just stubborn. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. But if my story proves anything, I continued, it's that hate only wins when we stop showing up, when we stop believing people can change. I scanned the room at the families, the kids, the unlikely friendships formed because two broken people refused to stay broken. I'm still standing, I said, and I'm still believing. The crowd stood with me, applause thunderous. And for the first time since that awful morning, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a builder, a bridge, not a battleground. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the sun dipped low, Karen found me by the mural on the side of the community center. A mural we had commissioned together. It showed a bridge stretching across a chasm, on one side hands clenched into fists, on the other open palms reaching out. In the middle, standing tall, was a lone figure holding the bridge steady against the storm. It wasn't painted to look like me, but it felt like it was about me anyway. Karen stood silently beside me for a long moment. I still think about it, she said finally. About what? I asked. That day. How close I came to ruining your life. How easy it was. I nodded. Easy isn't the same as right, I said softly. She laughed, bitter and self-aware. No, it never is. Ewun, we stood there as the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the mural. I'm sorry, she said again. Not as an excuse, not as a plea. As a truth. I know, I said, and I meant it. Life wasn't perfect after that. There were still bad days, still side eyes, still whispers. But there were also new friendships, new hope, new bridges built stone by stone, hand over hand, refusal by refusal to let the past have the last word. And somewhere along the way I realized I wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. There were others now lifting, building, believing alongside me. Not because they were perfect, not because the world had magically gotten better, but because we chose to stay, to listen, to fight, not with fists, but with open hands, one choice at a time, one stubborn, beautiful act of grace at a time. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The wedding, the Suri Renon,